Welcome and thank you for standing by. All lines have been placed in a listen-only mode for today's presentation. The call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I will now introduce your conference host, Ms. Emily Day. You may begin.
All right, hi everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Boundary and Annexation Survey, or BAS webinar. My name is Emily Day. I work in the Spatial Data Collection and Products branch of the Geography Division of the U.S. Census Bureau, and I'm joined today by Michaela Torog, who also works in the Spatial Data Collection and Products branch, and she'll be doing the demonstrations for you later on in the presentation. I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for calling into our webinar. I think this is the most people we've ever had called into a BAS webinar, so really exciting. And we just wanted to thank you for spending the time with us today to learn more about BAS and for your interest and your participation in our geographic partnership programs. We do expect the webinar to run about 2.5 hours. If you can't make it for the whole webinar, don't worry. We will send out PowerPoints covered in this presentation to the email that you registered to the WebEx with. We will also be recording this and posting it to our BAS website, so you can also revisit this recording at any time. We do break this up into 2 parts. So for the first part, we'll cover a high-level BAS overview, cover some general information about BAS and important information for participants. Then we'll cover the specific steps involved in participating in BAS and creating a submission. I'll then go over a tour of our BAS website, show you where to find everything you need, and we'll cover the steps that are involved. I'll walk you through how to review your boundaries using our Tiger Web application, and how to complete and respond using the annual response form. After that, we will have our first Q&A session. You can ask questions either through the phone or in the chat window. And we'll take a 5-minute break. When we come back, Michaela will go through an overview of the digital BAS response methods, and we'll provide demonstrations on how to create a BAS submission using our Geographic Update Partnership Software, or GUPS, as well as our BAS Partnership Toolbox for ArcGIS. And she'll conclude by showing you how to submit those digital updates to the Census Bureau using the Secure Web Incoming Module, or SWIM. One thing that is different this year, when you exit out of the WebEx call, you will receive an evaluation link. If you could, please fill that out. It helps us make these webinars better for you, so we definitely appreciate the feedback. So what is BAS? Well, BAS is an annual opportunity for tribal, state, and local governments to submit boundary changes such as annexations, de-annexations, as well as small corrections to spatially incorrect boundaries. You can submit name changes and status updates such as incorporations, disincorporations, mergers, and consolidations. So throughout the year, your government annexes or removes any land from your boundaries. BAS is going to be your annual opportunity to send those updates in to us. So we conduct the BAS because we fulfill a pretty crucial role within the National Spatial Data Infrastructure. Our agency's responsibility covers governmental units, shown there outlined in red. And the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB Circular A16, actually designates the Census Bureau as the lead federal agency for maintaining national data about governments and statistical, administrative, and legal boundaries. So we conduct BAS to fulfill this responsibility and to make sure that all of the boundary data in our system is current and accurate. This is pretty important because the information collected by us is actually uploaded to the Census website through TigerWeb, shapefiles, and geodatabases, but it's also loaded to the USGS National Map and data.gov. And all of these services provide open data for federal, state, and local government agencies. So if people are using your data, we want to make sure that it's most up to date and benefits you as is possible. The legal boundary data that we collect through BAS, it creates a geographic framework that helps us to tabulate data from various censuses, programs, operations, and surveys. This includes, but is not limited to, the decennial census, American Community Survey, and population estimates programs. It's also used to establish the housing and population counts within a government. So this helps contribute to our goal when it comes to the decennial census, counting every person in one time where they live. So in order to get the location data, we need to make sure that our legal boundary data is correct. So by participating in BAS, you're able to confirm that all legal boundaries in our database are current and accurate, and increase the accuracy of statistical data collected and tabulated by our various censuses and surveys. Accurate boundaries provide the foundation for good decision-making for tribal, state, and local governments, and most importantly, participating in BAS ensures that your communities receive the federal funding that they're entitled to. And this federal funding pays for education, housing, healthcare opportunities, and services for the elderly, just to name a few. So it's really important that your community gets as much federal funding as it actually needs. The Census Bureau invites all active, functioning legal governments to participate in BAS. This includes federally recognized tribes, either with a reservation and/or off-reservation trust land, counties or county equivalents, such as parishes and boroughs, minor civil divisions, such as towns and townships, and incorporated places, including cities and villages. Now, we do maintain a couple of program contacts for all eligible governments. The first program contact that most of you are probably familiar with is the BAS contact. And the BAS contact is the primary contact for all BAS-related correspondence and receives all survey materials. If we don't have a BAS contact for a government, then we'll usually reach out to a local planning or GIS department and try to establish one there. And if we still can't establish a BAS contact through those means, we will send all correspondence and survey materials to the tribal chair or highest elected official, which is the second program contact. Governments should provide the BAS contact and tribal chair or highest elected official contact information either through the annual response or non-response follow-up phase of the program. Since they do receive all BAS correspondence, it is pretty important to make sure that these contacts are up to date. Now, we realize that not all governments have the resources to respond to BAS. You might have some smaller towns that don't have means to respond digitally, or maybe areas that don't have the best internet connection, or, you know, what have you. But we actually maintain two types of BAS agreements that can help aid governments in responding to BAS and getting that boundary data to us. The first type of agreement are called state agreements. So the Census Bureau maintains state agreements with interested state governments where there are laws in place that require all local governments to report their boundary changes to a designated state agency. So if, you know, your state requires all local governments to report their boundary changes to the Secretary of State's office, your state would be eligible for a state agreement. There are two types of state agreements. Under the first type of state agreement, the state will report all boundary changes for the governments within its jurisdiction. And as you can see from the map here, the first type of state agreement covers all of the states shown in blue there. The second type of state agreement involves the state reporting a list of governments that reported boundary changes. So they don't report the actual changes, they just let us know which governments reported boundary changes to the state. And then the Census Bureau can use that list to confirm and validate boundary changes that local governments reported to BAS. And at this time, we only maintain the second type of agreement with the state shown in green on the map, which is Georgia. We're always looking to establish new state agreements with interested state governments. So if your state government would be interested in establishing a state agreement, we encourage you to contact the Census Bureau. Just a reminder that to be eligible for a state agreement, your state must have laws in place that require local governments to report all boundary changes to a state agency. And but if your state doesn't have appropriate laws in place, but you are interested in establishing a state agreement, you're still able to contact the Census Bureau, and we can try and set up some sort of alternative agreement for you. Now, on our website, we do have a state law summary document, and I'll show you exactly where to find this on the website later, but for now, every year we create a state law summary table document, and this allows you to select your state, and you can see based on the filing where you're required to send all of those updates to. So in this situation, Florida would be eligible for a state agreement. Let's say you're with the state of Arizona, we would probably set up some sort of alternative agreement with this state, seeing as they don't require all updates to be reported to the state. Now, the other type of agreement that we offer is called a consolidated BAS or Cgas agreements. And we offer these agreements to counties that are interested in submitting boundary changes for all of the governments within their jurisdiction. If the county government is interested in establishing a CBAS agreement, we encourage them to fill out the CBAS agreement or BAS 6 form, which is located in the consolidated BAS or CBAS agreements part of the website. Once again, we'll show you where exactly to find that a little later on. So the section, your first section, you'll fill in the CBAS contact. This will be the county-based BAS contact where all CBAS materials will be sent. In section 2, you'll then fill out a list of all of the governments within your jurisdiction and whether or not they agree to participate. Now, really important to mention that participation in a CBAS agreement is completely optional. So if your county has one major city in it and, multiple smaller towns, and that major city still wants to respond for itself and feels it has the resources to respond for itself, you can still enter into a CBAS agreement. You would just put that city's name here and just say that they don't want to participate. And they would still continue to receive all of their BAS materials, but all of the governments that agreed to sign up for the consolidated BAS agreement would not receive any materials. So once an agreement is established, whether state or CBAS agreement, the local governments that are included in that agreement will no longer receive a BAS package each year. The highest elected official will continue to receive their annual BAS notification, and that annual BAS notification will include either the state or CBAS contact information so that they know who to reach out to get their boundary updates in. But it will not include materials to update their boundaries. Now, we encourage people to sign up for BAS agreements whenever they're eligible to. They coordinate the sharing of information between the Census Bureau and state and local governments. They can reduce the duplication of effort and cost burden to local governments. And most importantly, they help us to ensure collection of complete and accurate geographies through BAS. Going back to that county that might have the one major city and the multiple smaller towns, some of those smaller towns might not have the resources to respond to BAS, especially using a digital response method. So this enables another government that might have those resources to respond to take that burden for you and make sure that your updates can get in. So there are a couple of key dates that you'll have to keep in mind for the 2021 BAS. Boundary updates should legally be in effect on or before January 1st, 2021 to be reported to the 2021 BAS. Updates that are reported to the 2021 BAS but were not, BAS updates that were reported to the 2021 BAS but were not in effect on or before January 1st will still be processed by the Census Bureau, but they won't be included in American Community Survey or Population Estimates Program data products for that year. We will do our best, though, to make sure they're reflected in next year's data products, however. And we do have two BAS deadlines. March 1st is the first BAS deadline. If your government submits boundary updates by March 1st, those boundary updates will be included in the American Community Survey and Population Estimates Program data for that year, as well as in next year's BAS materials. If you're not able to get your updates in by March 1st, but you're able to get them in by May 31st, they will be reflected in next year's BAS materials and in next year's American Community Survey and Population Estimates program data, but not in the current year's data for those programs. So we kick off BAS with the annual response email, which all of you should have received already. We send this out usually in early January, 1st or 2nd week. The purpose of this email is to notify governments of the upcoming BAS cycle, and we provide instructions on how to get started. There is a link in your email that will take you to the How to Get Started section of the BAS website. And on this page, you'll find steps for how to participate, and you'll get step-by-step instructions on how to do that. So we're going to cover those steps now. The first step is to review the Census Bureau's existing boundary data. We strongly encourage participants to do this before they complete the annual response form. You have a couple of different methods for reviewing your boundaries. The easiest one to use is the TigerWeb viewer. It allows a web-based mapping application that allows you to visualize the Census Bureau's topologically integrated geographic encoding and referencing, or Tiger data, without actually having to download any data. It's done completely in a web browser, and it's really easy to use. If you don't want to use TigerWeb, you also have the option to download partnership shapefiles and use them within your own GIS software. You can download BAS PDF reference maps, or you can use the Geographic Update Partnership Software, or GUPS, to review your boundaries. And regardless of which method you choose, all of these tools are available on the BAS website. Now, this is an example that helps explain the importance of reviewing your boundaries, and this is something that actually happened. So in 2015, this government reported no changes to that year's BAS. And the blue boundary on the map there represents the Census Bureau's representation of the boundary, which in 2015 matched the local government's representation. Now, in 2016 and 2017, the government annexed a significant portion of land, which is shown in the yellow boundary, but for some reason they did not respond to either the 2016 or 2017 BAS. You know, maybe there were some staffing issues, there was no BAS contact for the government. You know, whatever happened, but they didn't respond to BAS. So as a result, these changes went unchanged in the Census Bureau's database. So the Census Bureau still had the blue boundary as a representation for this government, whereas in reality, there should have been a lot more land there. I don't know why my PowerPoint did that, but let me go back. All right, so as a result, in 2018, the new BAS contact just looked back in their data, in their records for that year, for 2018, saw that there were no changes that were made that recently, and just responded no changes. Since they didn't review the boundary data prior to completing the annual response form and reporting no changes, the areas that are shown in the red hatch marks actually went unchanged in the Census Bureau's database, which therefore affected the government's housing and population count and affected the allocation of federal funding to this community. So, you know, this government may not have received all of the federal funding that they should have received. Just a note too, it's also good, even if you do submit boundary changes to the Census Bureau, while we do our best to make those updates, you know, exactly how they come in, we're not perfect. So it's always a good idea to make sure that we have implemented those boundary changes correctly as well. It always helps to have a second set of eyes on that. So once you've reviewed the Census Bureau's existing boundary data and you've determined whether or not there are changes to report, the second step to participating in BAS is to complete the online annual response form. The annual response form is an official form that you can access from the BAS website, And it allows you to do three things. First, you'll determine whether there are changes to report. And if there are changes to report, you can indicate your preferred participation method. The second thing you can do is review and update your tribal chair or highest elected official's contact information and update if necessary. And you can review your government's designated BAS contact and update if necessary. We do recommend that all participants complete and submit the annual response form, even if your government does not have any boundary changes to report. If you respond with no changes, then we remove you from the non-response follow-up list, and it therefore reduces additional outreach from the Census Bureau. So if you respond no changes, we won't bother you again until January 2022. If there are no boundary changes to report, just check the appropriate box, return it to us, and no further action is required. If your government determines that they need to submit BAS updates, you should also indicate how you wish to receive your survey materials. There are three options on the annual response form. You can either download digital materials from the BAS website, you can request digital materials on a disc by mail, or you can request paper materials by mail. Now, it's important to note that regardless of whatever material delivery method you indicate on the annual response form, you can download maps, partnership shapefiles, and GUPS directly from the BAS website at any time. So, if you were really ambitious and you've already submitted your annual response form and you marked that you wanted to, do paper, but after this webinar, you feel really comfortable using a digital response method and you want to go ahead and download digital materials from the BAS website, you're absolutely able to do that and just continue with your digital response method. Which brings us to our third step in participating in BAS, which is to submit boundary updates using one of our available response methods. And there are three of them. The first one is to use the GUPS software. GUPS is an open source QGIS-based software. It's completely free and easy to use, so you don't need any sort of special license or anything to use it. You just download it from the BAS website or download it from a Census Bureau provided disk. GUPS is intended for those with a basic understanding of GIS or maybe some limited experience with GIS. But it's great for participants of all skill levels if, for whatever reason, you can't use your own GIS software to create your BAS submission. And the software is available either on a disk or by downloading from the BAS website. The second method is for more experienced GIS users, and that is to use their own GIS software. The Census Bureau will provide the BAS Partnership Toolbox and partnership shapefiles that you can download and use to submit your boundary changes. And it's important to note that while the partnership shapefiles are available either on a disk or for download from the BAS website, the BAS Partnership Toolbox is only available by downloading it from the BAS website. Unfortunately, we are not able to provide that on a disk for you. And the third method, if you don't know what GIS is, you're not really comfortable using it, no worries, we still have our paper BAS method. Obviously, this method requires no GIS experience, and if you opt to use this method, you'll receive paper maps in the mail as well as annotation materials, and then you'll make updates onto those maps using those provided annotation materials. Now, once you're done making your BAS updates, you will return your updates using one of two methods, depending on the response method you chose. Digital BAS participants, those who use the GUPS software or their own GIS software, should use the Secure Web Incoming Module, or SWIM, to submit their updates. SWIM is the official web portal for uploading materials to the Census Bureau, and it is the only secure method for digital program submission. Due to security reasons, we cannot accept files sent via email or through any sort of alternate file transfer protocol or FTP site. And we'll demonstrate how to submit BAS updates through SWIM later on in the presentation. If you did paper BAS, then you will receive a postage paid return envelope with your materials, and you can return your annotated maps using that postage paid return envelope. It'll send it to our National Processing Center in Jeffersonville, Indiana. So we're going to switch gears here a little bit. We're going to talk about one of our BAS-related programs, which is BAS State Certification. BAS State Certification is an annual opportunity for state agencies to verify that the tabular attributes for legal boundary, name, and status updates reported through BAS were done in accordance with state law. By doing this, we're able to ensure the accuracy and legality of all boundary changes and legal statuses that were submitted to BAS. If you are familiar with BAS State Certification already, you'll notice that our program was suspended for 2020 due to the decennial census and all of the decennial partnership programs that we had participants participating in. So the 2021 state certification program will review both 2020 and 2021 BAS updates. So as part of the state certification program, we request that each state governor designate a state certifying official, or SCO. And the SCO's job is to review listings of all active governments and BAS updates within their state, and to either certify, edit, remove, make the necessary changes that need to be made, essentially. We break up all of these updates into 4 different lists. The first list will have a list of dissolutions for that government. List 3 and 4 will include a list of all active incorporated places and minor civil divisions, respectively. And then list 2 will provide a list of all of the boundary updates that were submitted to BAS the previous year. And so the SCO just reviews all of these lists. Now, in states that have strong reporting laws, that's, those states where they require all boundary updates to be reported to a state agency, the SCO can actually certify correctly reported changes. They can edit boundary updates to include accurate attributes. They can reverse changes that were reported to the Census Bureau but not properly reported to the state. And they can add any changes that were reported to the state but not to the Census Bureau. And since these states have strong reporting laws, we can go ahead and make these changes. In these situations, we just send a letter to the BAS contact of the local government, just informing them of the discrepancy. In states without strong reporting laws, the process is a little bit different. The SCO can still add and remove changes, but we will not add or remove any reported legal changes from our database before we send a discrepancy letter to the local government. Through that discrepancy letter, we just ask the local government to report any missing changes to the current BAS cycle and to work with the state agency to ensure that proper processes are followed to make their boundary updates effective. So the schedule is a little confusing, so we figured we would lay this out for you guys. So in January 2021, we sent out the 2021 BAS annual response email. March 2021 is the first BAS deadline. May 31st is the final BAS deadline. When updates come in, we process them. And around October timeframe, we will send state governors the 2021 BAS state certification letter, ask them to designate an SCO. They'll have about 1 or 2 months to do that. In December, we will then send all of the SCOs the listings of changes that were reported to both the 2020 and 2021 BAS. The SCOs will have until about March 2022 timeframe to return those certified listings to us, and we will send discrepancy letters to local governments probably around late March, early April 2022. And this gives local governments an opportunity to submit any missing updates to the 2022 BAS by the May 31st deadline. Now, for additional BAS information, including information on how to get started with BAS, we encourage you to visit the BAS website using the link provided on the screen. You can find program information, program schedule, respondent guides, reference materials, and any sort of information on BAS events and trainings on the website. So we'll take you there now and show you where to find everything. So this is the homepage of the BAS webpage. If you don't have the link handy, honestly, the way that I usually find it is by opening up a search engine and typing in Census Bureau BAS. It's usually the first web page to pop up. So we've got three main tiles here. Under the What is the BAS section, you'll find information on what BAS is. You can find our flyers if you need them. You'll find information on the program schedule, information on who can participate, eligible governments, why we conduct BAS, and who uses BAS results. And I'll come back to the How to Get Started section because that'll segue us into our next demonstrations. But if you are creating a BAS submission and you need help, you want someone to walk you through how to do it, you can find our BAS videos here. At this time, we have 4 series. We're working on a 5th one right now. But right now we have the Introduction to BAS series, which covers pretty much everything we just covered in the presentation. If you're doing a digital BAS submission using the BAS Partnership Toolbox, you can find step-by-step instructions for doing that here. Our GUPS series is great for those who need step-by-step instructions on creating a BAS submission using GUPS. And we also have an Introduction to Tribal BAS video here. We're actually in the process of posting this to our Census Bureau YouTube page now, so it should be available by the end of the week, maybe early next week at the absolute latest, but that link will be available. And then in addition, for our Tribal BAS participants, we will have a 5th video here under the GUPS series showing how Tribal BAS participants should use the GUPS software to create a submission. Here you can find our BAS State Agreements page. You'll find the map that we talked about in the presentation and your list of state annexation reporting laws. Underneath, you'll find Consolidated BAS or Cgas Agreements information. On this page, you'll actually find a map showing, if you're just looking real quick to see if your county participates in a partial or full Cgas agreement, you can look on the map here. And then if you want some more details on the specific entities that participate in that Cgas agreement, we have an Excel spreadsheet that'll provide a list of all the states, all the counties within that state that participate, and whether or not each government within there participates. Up here, under the Events tab, you'll find information on Bas Events and Trainings. Obviously, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we were not able to hold in-person trainings. So we have 4 webinars. Should you wish to attend another one, you can find that information here and information for registering for one. And then the Geographies tab here, you can find any sort of reference data that you need, maybe for reviewing boundaries or what have you. You can find reference maps, shape files, mapping tools such as TigerWeb, and reference files. Now, the How to Get Started tab is probably the most important for you to look at to get your BAS submission going. These are the specific steps involved. Under the How to Participate section, you'll find the 4 methods for reviewing your boundaries. And we're going to go ahead and show you how to use TigerWeb. So when you click TigerWeb, you'll come here and you'll click TigerWeb under the Applications panel. Once TigerWeb opens, you'll see a map of the United States, minus Alaska and Hawaii. And so the first thing you'll do is make sure that your vintage is set to current. And then you'll select the layers for the type of government you represent. In this example, I'm going to show you an unincorporated place. So in this situation, I would select places and county subdivisions. You can also select American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian areas, or states and counties. Those will be the other layers that show legal boundaries. Then you'll come up here to this query tool. It's the globe with the magnifying glass. Make sure that the attribute tab is selected. We'll select the same layer that we just turned on, the places and county subdivisions. And then we will come down here to incorporated places. And then in the enter name of feature box, I'm just going to enter the name of the government here and select submit. Now, if your name is really popular and it appears in a bunch of different states, just select the place that you're interested in, and it should zoom right in there. Now, a couple of things that you should be aware of that will help you review your boundaries. If you come back to this Layers tab, you should turn on the Transportation, Roads, and Railroads layer. And coming over here to this button in the upper right-hand corner, you can view landmass, terrain, or satellite. We recommend turning on the satellite imagery. That'll really help assist with your boundary review. You can zoom in using either the scroll bar on your mouse or this scroll bar here. And then you can just click and drag to zoom and pan around the map to find areas of your boundary that might need updating. So once you have reviewed your boundaries, you'll come down here to step 2, which is to complete the annual response form. We'll select Respond Now. Now, ordinarily, I would type in the, if you type in your entity's name here, you can select it and it'll auto-populate everything. Otherwise, you can enter in your BAS ID. That's the 11-digit number you'll find in the subject line of the annual response email. Like I said, I'm not going to fill that out right now just because everything here will populate. So section 1 is the annual response section. If we don't have any boundary changes to report, we'll select this box here. If we do have boundary changes to report, we will select one of these 3 boxes depending on how we wish to access our materials. We'll then come down here, and this information will be auto-populated once you type in your government's name. We'll just review that contact information, make any updates that are necessary, and then we'll do the same thing with the BAS contact section, review it and make any updates as necessary. Once you're done, you'll click Submit, and you should receive a thank you email. If you don't have any changes to submit, you're finished after this step. But if you do have boundary changes to submit, you can come here to the response method section. And depending on which response method you choose, this is where you can find your respondent guides. In the case of the GUPS tab, you will also find information for downloading GUPS. So that concludes the first half of the webinar. Catherine, I think we can go ahead and open up the phone lines for questions.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Michaela Torag. As Emily mentioned earlier, I also work in the Spatial Data Collections and Products branch for the Census Bureau Geography Division as part of the BAS team. So today I will be doing a technical demonstration. So as we mentioned in the BAS overview presentation, there are 3 methods available for creating your BAS submission. 2 of these methods utilize digital resources, and the third option utilizes paper maps. So I will give 2 technical demonstrations on creating your BAS submission, 1 demonstration on how to use the Geographic Update Partnership Software, or GUPS, and the second demonstration using your own GIS software. This demonstration will use ArcGIS. We will then demonstrate how to submit your changes to BAS using the Census Bureau's Secure Web Incoming Module, or SWIM. When preparing a digital BAS submission, you will want to have the following items handy: legal boundary change information, including the change type, authorization type, documentation numbers, effective date, and area in acres if available; a locally sourced boundary file; Census Bureau boundary and feature data; and GUPS or other commercial GIS software. This first technical demonstration will feature the Geographic Update Partnership Software. GUPS is a user-friendly geographic information system that is customized for each of the Census Bureau's programs. GUPS features a specific BAS module that offers tools specific to the BAS program and allows participants to create a standardized submission. This allows the Census Bureau to easily process your returned BAS files. If there are any users on the phone that may wish to participate in BAS using paper maps, GUPS could be a good method to learn for submitting your updates digitally, as digital submissions are more accurate than paper updates. In this portion of the training, we will cover the following GUPS-related items: downloading and installing GUPS onto your computer, accessing the Census Bureau shapefiles and setting up your GUPS project, the general GUPS tools, adding your own data to GUPS, the BAS toolbar, including how to make BAS updates using the BAS toolbar, quality control checks, what they are and what they look for, and running the quality control checks, exporting your BAS submission, and returning your BAS submission using SWIM. GUPS can be downloaded and installed from the BAS website. You can also request the installer and data on a CD, DVD on your annual response form or by contacting the Census Bureau. If you used GUPS in the past, you will need to download the version posted on the web for use with the 2021 BAS. You can easily check if you have the correct version by looking at the subprogram dropdown in the map management window, which we will cover in this demonstration. If the most recent version is installed, 2021 Boundary and Annexation Survey will be available as an option in the dropdown. If you have not used GUPS in the past and need to install the program, you can access the link and instructions to download and install GUPS by visiting the BAS website. Once you're on the BAS website, you can use the Information for Respondents tab on the left side of the page and choose the Response Method section. From here, you will select the GUPS tab at the bottom of the page. On this page, you will find a link to the GUPS download and installation instructions. Above this link, you will also find the GUPS installation instructions and respondent guides, which provide additional guidance and step-by-step instructions for installing GUPS and creating your BAS submission. Click on this link to find the downloadable access to the GUPS software. Click on the link to download GUPS, and you will receive a pop-up that asks if you would like to open or save gups.zip. Select Save and click OK. Once it's downloaded, you will visit the location on your computer where you saved and unzip the file. After the file is unzipped, you will click on the Setup .bat file. You will want to ensure that you select this .bat file, the Windows batch file, and this will install GUPS onto your computer. The 2021 BAS will use GUPS version 13.0.0-3 and is built on QGIS 3.4.4. An installer will open featuring a QGIS setup wizard. Follow the prompts in the wizard. You will need to agree to the license agreement, choose an install location, and choose components. If you requested GUPS on a CD or DVD, you will insert the disk into your computer and follow the setup instructions. So once you have installed GUPS, you are ready to begin working on your BAS submission. First, you will need to open QGIS by clicking on the QGIS icon that appears after the installation is complete. It will look something like this and will either be in your Start menu or on your desktop. To set up your BAS project, you will use the Map Management tool here. This tool should open automatically when you open QGIS. However, if it does not, you can simply click on the icon here that looks like a map with a north arrow. You will use the Map Management tool to set up your workspace and download the Census Bureau shapefiles for review. When using the Map Management tool to set up your project, you will need to select the program, which will be 2021 Boundary and Annexation Survey, or if you are a tribal entity, you will select the 2021 Tribal Boundary and Annexation Survey. You will then select a subprogram, which will be 2021 Boundary and Annexation Survey. If you previously had GUPS installed and this is not an option in the subprogram drop-down menu, you will need to update your GUPS version here before continuing. Under State, you will select the state that your government is within. For the purposes of this demonstration, we will be using an entity in Louisiana. You will then select the working county. The working county is the county your government is within. If your entity is in 2 or more counties, you will have to create a project for each county your government is in. We suggest completing your updates within the first county and then moving to the second using this Map Management tool. After you select a working county, a dialog box will appear, which will allow you to select the data resource for the working county. Your options will be to bring the shapefiles in directly from the Census Bureau website or Census Web, select shapefiles off of your hard drive, or use a disk to import the shapefiles. We strongly recommend using the Census Web option. If the Census Web option does not work, you can download the BAS Partnership shapefiles from the BAS website and select the downloaded shapefiles on your computer. I'll go ahead and show you on the BAS website where to find the files. Sorry, we went to a different page there. So from the Boundary and Annexation Survey homepage, you will click the Geographies tab on the left side of the screen and go to BAS Mapping Files. So from here, you can download the shapefiles for the 2021 BAS. And what you will do is choose your state, and then you'll select the county or counties that you need to download shapefiles for. You can select up to 5 individual counties to download, and then you will hit Submit, and your download will start. So for the sake of this demonstration, we used the Census Web option, and we can see now that it has finished bringing in those files, and our next drop-down is available for us to choose. So now you'll select the entity type of the entity you're reporting for. So in this case, we're going to select Place, and then you'll select the name of the entity or of the government. So in this example, we are using Zachary. You can either scroll through the list or just start typing, and it will take you to the correct government name. So once you choose the entity, a list will appear below the entity name here that contains the names of all the counties in the selected state. The names of the counties that are adjacent to the working county will show up at the top of the list highlighted in yellow. You have the option to check any counties, including the adjacent counties that you want to visualize on the. If your entity is in 2 or more counties, you will want to select the additional county or counties at this time. Finally, you will select Open, and the Census Bureau data for your entity will appear in your map screen. So I have our project open here. Sometimes it can take a few minutes for the project to open, so we just suggest being patient. It's bringing in all the data and symbolizing everything, but it will eventually load and look a little something like this. So before we get started into the demo of creating changes, I want to go over a few of the general GUPS tools that you'll need to use. So the toolbars loaded by default are located here along the top of the GUPS workspace. These feature tools that allow you to navigate the map and save your work. So we have tools such as the pan tool. You can zoom in. And the closer you zoom in, the more detail will become available on the map. You can zoom back out. This Save button will be your best friend. You'll want to save your changes often, just in case GUPS crashes or anything happens. We suggest saving often, and that way you don't lose any work. There's also a measure tool here. So you can choose any unit to measure in, meters or feet. And as you can see, it'll snap to existing edges, and you can measure segments. You can dock and undock toolbars, move them around as you wish. The Layers panel, located here along the left-hand side of the map, features all of the layers that are available to display in the map. The most beneficial layers are probably going to be the edges layer. This includes representations of roads, linear water features, non-visible boundaries, and railroads. The place, NCD, and county layers. So depending on which feature you are updating, this will represent the boundary that the Census Bureau has on file for your government. Since we're updating a place here, place is the prominent one displayed at this time. There's also the water layer, which can be helpful in orienting your location on the map. Layers can be manipulated to enhance your experience with GUPS. You can customize the symbolization of the layers by right-clicking the layer and choosing Properties, and going to the Symbology tab. You can also rearrange layers to change their hierarchy or drawing order on the map. You can turn layers off and on by checking the box next to the layer's name in the Layers panel. And some layers, such as the Edges layer, are grouped and can be turned on and off as a group or as individual layers. You can add imagery data and your own shapefile data to GUPS using the Manage Layers toolbar here with all these little blue icons. Adding your own shapefile data can make it easier to identify where there are boundary discrepancies, which I'll show you in a little bit. So to add imagery data, you'll select the Add Raster Layer tool. This opens the Data Source Manager window where you can add various types of data. You can also load web services into GUPS by selecting the Add WMTS layer tool here. You can also load ArcGIS, map, and feature servers. To add your own boundary shapefile or parcel shapefile, you'll select the Vector Add tool. It looks like a little V with the plus sign next to it if you're on the main toolbar. Before you import your shapefile, make sure that it is not projected, as that can cause issues with the layer displaying properly in GUPS. So I'm going to go ahead and import the shapefile for the government that we will be looking at, which is Zachary in Louisiana. So you'll want to, I'll demonstrate that again, choose the three dots next to the source vector data set, and then you'll navigate to wherever you have your shapefile saved, and you'll choose the shapefile that you want to load in, and click Open, and then click Add, and Close. So as you can see, my city limits for Zachary are now added to the map. I'm going to go ahead and go in and change the symbology here so that it's easier to see the differences. And I'm just going to make it a simple blue outline. There we go. So as you can see here, there's some predetermined symbologies you can choose, or you can edit it yourself using the top portion. And I'll click OK. So now we can see that my symbology has changed for the city limits. So now that we're familiar with the general tools offered in GUPS and we have our own data loaded into the workspace, you're in a good place to begin creating your BAS submission. Your BAS submission should consist of only changed polygons or polygons representing where there are differences between the Census Bureau shapefile and your own local files. A few of the most common changes that you will see are annexations or additions of land to your entity, de-annexations or deletion of land from your entity, and boundary corrections. You will create changed polygons to represent these discrepancies found. When reporting or creating annexation or de-annexation polygons, you will need to have available the following information, which is your legal boundary change information, such as the change type, authorization type, effective date, documentation numbers, and area in acres if available. Please note that boundary corrections do not require any legal documentation. So to create the change polygons representing where the two files differ, we will use the BAS toolbar, which is here under the general GUPS toolbars. To add an annexation or remove land as a result of a de-annexation that is already bounded by features in the Census Bureau's data, you will use the Modify Area feature tool on the BAS toolbar. If the area you wish to add or remove is not already bounded by features, you will need to do two steps. First, you'll create the sides of the polygon using the Add Linear feature tool here. And then you will add or remove area using the Modify Area feature tool. To find changes that need to be addressed, zoom into the map and pan around the borders of your entity to look for changes. So we can see for this entity, there are quite a lot of discrepancies where the Census Bureau has on file does not match the local representation of the boundary. So I bookmarked a few areas to talk about, so we'll go to those now. Or not, they didn't save. Okay. And that's why you save your map often. All right. So here, for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to say that even though the local shapefile still shows this area as not being within the city limits, let's say you're the GIS person for your county or your place, and you know that this annexation just went through and you need to update your local file, but that this area is being annexed into your city. So we can see here that this area is already bound by edges, both visible and non-visible edges here. So we can go ahead and use the Modify Area feature tool to annex this into the Zachary city limit. So you can dock this tool wherever you like or keep it out separate. I like to keep it docked on the left-hand side. So when you first open the Modify Area feature tool, you'll first want to select which geography you want to add or remove or modify. So in this example, we're using place. And then next you'll want to choose which place you want to add area into. So it'll bring up all the places or counties that are available to add area to. So here we'll choose Zachary City. And you can see once we choose Zachary City, a lot of these tools become ungraded. So this selection tool allows different selection methods. The green plus sign is the add area tool. The red minus sign is the remove area tool. You can also navigate between the various governments or entities that are listed, and it'll zoom to the extent, the full extent of the entity. We also have the option to add an entity, as well as delete an area feature. So I'm going to go back to my change area here. So we have Zachary City selected, and now we want to select the faces that we want to annex into the city. So if you have your selection tool selected, I just like to use these select features. You can draw a box around them, but you have to be careful because if you draw a box too large, it will select faces outside of where you want to add. But you can also select by polygon or by freehand, however is most comfortable for you. The way I like to do it, and this button is handy too, the deselect features from all layers. That'll deselect everything you have selected, which can be really helpful if you accidentally select too many faces. So I'm going to use select features and then hold down Control to select multiple features at a time. So let's say we're just going to annex this whole area as part of the annexation. So I have my features selected, I have my faces selected, and now I'll choose the Add Area button. Once you add the area, you'll choose a change type. So you can choose boundary correction, legal change, offset, or corridor. Since this is an annexation, we'll go ahead and choose legal change. So next you'll be asked to enter an effective date. There's a calendar here that you can use, or you can type in the date. The authorization type, so local law, ordinance, resolution, state level action, or other. For this demonstration, we'll say this is an ordinance. You'll then enter the document number. So this would be the ordinance number. Also, we had a question about including documentation. If you're using GUPS, you can go ahead and add the documentation right in here using this file folder. And then you can navigate on your computer to wherever you have the documentation stored. And then you'll click Open, and it will go ahead and include that documentation with your submission. And then you'll choose your change type. So for us, it would be annexation. So once you have the required fields filled in, you'll click OK. And then this is committed as an annexation. So for the next demonstration, I will show you how to make a change when the area isn't already bounded by features in the Census Bureau's database. I'm going to turn my city limits back on so that I can see where discrepancies are. All right, so we can see here that this area should be taken out of the city. We'll say that this is a de-annexation. But if I turn off my city limits layer, we'll see that there aren't currently any underlying edges that represent this polygon. So if we went to select an area to remove, it's going to select these entire faces instead of just the area that we want to de-annex because those edges aren't currently drawn in. So in this case, to draw in edges, we'll use the Add Linear Feature tool. Once this tool is selected, you can trace over your existing edges layer. It will only snap to the Census Bureau edges. It won't snap to your the shape file that you brought in. So you may want to zoom in to get it a little closer. So I'm going to go ahead and just add that one edge. Every time you add a linear feature, you have to select the Map Tagger Feature Classification Code, or MTFCC. So for something like this that isn't a road, you'll select the non-visible legal statistical boundaries and click OK. And then if we toggle our city limits layer off, we'll see that there's now an edge here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw in the other two edges to close in this polygon. It's important to note as well that the Census Bureau threshold for making proposed changes is 30 feet unless housing is impacted. And where housing could be impacted or areas along roads, the Census Bureau chooses to use street center lines rather than right-of-ways to ensure that housing and population are tabulated to correct geography. So if we have something like this where your local city limits layer is on the right-of-way or not snapped to the road, we suggest that you go ahead and snap it to the road when you create your change because that's something that we will likely do when we process your submission. And if you're like this and you're like, oh, I'm not panned up enough, you can switch to the pan tool and go to where you need to finish your edge, and then go back to the Add Linear Feature tool, and it'll still be there. So again, we'll select the non-visible boundary and click OK. And now that we have those edges drawn in, we can select the faces that we want to de-annex. And now we can see that it's selecting just our area for de-annexation. So since we're removing land, I'll hit the Remove Area button. And again, this would be a legal change. So we'd fill out the effective date. I'm just choosing arbitrary values here. And under Change Type, we'll see now that it says de-annexation. And click OK. And the process for creating a boundary correction would be the same. Boundary corrections are typically smaller and follow the general shape of your boundary. They're just changing the location. So this area here would be a really good example of a boundary correction. It's likely that it just got digitized incorrectly when it was first input into the system. So again, we would draw in our linear features and select the area to add or remove accordingly. For the sake of time, I won't show that again. So once you've completed all of your boundary updates and linear feature updates, you're ready to begin preparing your file for submission. So we're going to save our file here. And next, we're going to run the quality control checks. So GUPS features 2 built-in quality control checks under this geography review tool here on the BAS toolbar. The first QC tool is called the small area check. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the incorrect tool. It's here under review change polygon. I'm going to undock this so we can see the whole tool. So the first quality control check is the small area check. This looks for areas added that are smaller than 500 square feet. And the second tool is called Find Holes. This checks for any holes in the boundary that may have been created during the updating process. So we've opened our Review Change Polygons module, and we'll select place because that's what we made updates for. You'll see here that all of the changes we made, and there are a couple changes that I had made earlier, are included here in this list if you want to go through and see what changes you made. It will show you the area, whether it's being brought in or out of the city limits, as well as the change type. And then we ran the small area check, and it says no change polygons smaller than 500 square feet are present, so that's all good. And next we'll run find holes, and it says no holes present, so that's also good. If the tool does find any holes present, there will be an option to locate the hole, and it will go ahead and zoom you to it, and you can fix the hole within this tool. So if there are no issues found when you run the QC checks, you're ready to export your files for submission or to share with another participant. So if you're working with a colleague or someone else needs to take over your file, you will choose Export to zip. You'll see that it will check if you've run these quality control checks, as well as the date and time that you last ran them. You can run these quality control checks at any point, so we always recommend running them at least before you export the data. I'm sorry, my screen just timed out for a second. I think I'm back. Okay. There we go. Sorry about that. So then you'll click OK to continue with export. So you can either export for Census or share with another participant. Like I said, if you're working with a colleague or you need to send this to someone else, you can share with another participant. But if you're ready to submit it to the Census Bureau, you'll choose Export for Census and click OK. It will ask you for your contact information, and this is just in case we have any questions regarding your submission. So we ask that you include your contact information here, and then you'll click OK. It will pop up to let you know the location that the zip file was saved, and that's the zip file that you will be uploading through SWIM, which I will demonstrate after our ArcGIS presentation. So that concludes the GUPS demonstration, and I'm going to go on to the ArcGIS presentation. So the second method available for preparing your BAS submission digitally is by using your own GIS software. This demonstration, like I said, we use ArcGIS as well as the Census Bureau's BAS Partnership Toolbox. The BAS Partnership Toolbox allows participants to bypass some of the manual steps associated with the BAS review process. The BAS Partnership Toolbox quickly assists participants in retrieving the Census Bureau's partnership shapefiles, setting up the workspace, running the necessary geoprocessing tools to create the changes for review, running attribute QC checks, and packaging up submissions. When you complete your digital BAS submission using a GIS software, you will want to ensure that you have the following information available. Your 11-digit BAS ID for the government being processed, any legal boundary change information, once again including change type, authorization type, effective date, documentation numbers, and area in acres if available, locally sourced GIS shapefile of your boundary with a name field, and Census Bureau boundary data. The Census Bureau data will be downloaded and put in the workspace for you when using the BAS Partnership Toolbox. So to complete your digital BAS submission using the BAS Partnership Toolbox, you will need to have access to ArcGIS software and the BAS Partnership Toolbox, which includes an instructional document. Please note that the BAS Partnership Toolbox is for use with ArcGIS 10.0 or higher, and will not currently work with ArcGIS Pro. So the BAS Partnership Toolbox is available for download on the BAS website. So we'll go back. And if you're ever not sure how to get to the BAS website, you can't remember the URL, you can always just Google Census BAS, and it's going to be one of the first pages to come up, typically at the top. So once again, we're going to go to the Information for Respondents page and the Response Methods page. The default page here is the Digital BAS page. So here we'll click Learn More about the BAS Partnership Toolbox. And here's the link to download the BAS Partnership Tools. So when downloading the toolbox, we suggest that you save the download in the same folder that you plan to use for your BAS submission materials. This will ensure that all the data pieces are saved together. The toolbox is downloaded within a zip folder that you'll need to unzip before using the toolbox. So once you've downloaded the tool in a folder location of your choice, you're now able to use the BAS Partnership Toolbox. We suggest running the tools in ArcCatalog. So first you'll want to open ArcCatalog. And under the catalog tree, you'll navigate to where you saved the toolbox. So I have it here under Partnership Toolbox Download. So when it first downloads, it will have two subfolders, Projects with its INSI and Setup folder, which contains the toolbox. So if you expand the toolbox, you'll see that there are 6 tools here. You will run all of these to create your BAS submission, so I'll go through them. So the Census Data Download tool retrieves the Census Bureau data for the entity you're reviewing. For this tool, you only need the BAS ID, or if you've already downloaded the Census Bureau's partnership data, you'll need the zipped partnership shapefiles that you downloaded. The second tool, called Create Changes, will compare your local data file against the Census Bureau's partnership data to identify differences between the 2 layers and create a change polygon layer. You will need to ensure that there is an attribute in your local layer that represents a name field, which includes the name of your entity. The name must be proper case, it cannot be all uppercase, and must exactly match the name as shown in the Census Bureau's data, which I'll show you in just a minute. The third tool, named Sliver Blaster, will assist you with your review by removing any change polygons that the Census Bureau deems as too small to process, and will minimize the number of change polygons that you will need to review. The fourth tool, named Format Working in XD, applies helpful symbolization, standardization to the workspace. So once you have run the first 4 tools, you will then be ready to complete your BAS review. After completing your review and updating attributes of the change polygon layer, you'll run the 5th tool called Attribute Check, which provides helpful QC procedures that ensure all necessary attribute fields are completed. And then the 6th and final tool, called Export Submission Shapefiles, which packages your submission data into a zip folder and ensures that the naming is standardized and ready to return to the Census Bureau via SWIM. So I'll go ahead and take you step by step through the toolbox that I just outlined. You will want to make sure that you run these tools in order from 1 to 6. So the Census Data Download tool, as I mentioned previously, will download the Census Bureau partnership shapefiles for your entity. So here you'll need your BAS ID. Again, for this demonstration, we're using Zachary, Louisiana. So I will input the BAS ID here. Sorry, my ArcCatalog just froze up on me for a second. Okay, there we go. And then under Use Data Downloader, you will choose Yes if you want to download the census data. If you already downloaded the BAS Partnership shapefiles, you can select No, or if you have them on the CD or DVD, if you requested that from the Census Bureau, you can select No, and then you'll have to navigate to your zip files. Once you have all this filled in, you will click OK, and the tool will run and will let you know when it's complete. This may take a few minutes, especially for larger entities. So for the purposes of this demonstration, we ran that ahead of time. So once the tool completes, a folder named with your entity's BAS ID will appear under the project subfolder. There will be a geodatabase here, also named with your entity's BAS ID, with two feature classes, a reference feature class, which includes all of the data that was just downloaded from the Census Bureau, as well as the submission feature class, which will be empty for now. So next we'll run the Create Changes tool. So here you'll need to input your local boundary file. Before we do this, again, we want to make sure that our name in our local boundary file matches the name in the Census Bureau file. So we'll use this reference feature class here and look at the BAS place layer and preview the table. If you're submitting for a county, you would look at the county, but here we're doing place. And we can see here in the table, we want to look for the name field. So I'm going to scroll over until I find it. Oh, there it was. All right, so we can see here that our name in the Census Bureau data is listed as Zachary, and it's an uppercase B, and the rest is lowercase. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to my local file and make sure that my name matches before I start this tool, or else it won't run correctly. All right, so I have this pulled up for my local file, the same preview, and we can see that Zachary, the case and spelling all matches. And we'll take note of what field it is in because we will need that as well. So it's the city limit field. So we'll go back now and run this Create Changes tool. So we'll navigate to that local boundary file. You'll need to enter your BAS ID. Under Changes Being Processed, we will select Inc. Place. You can also choose county subdivision, county, or American Indian areas. And then here we need to enter that name field in local data. And you will want to match the case here as well. So like we said, it's city limit. And then you'll click OK, and this tool will run and create the changes. So now, after you've run that tool, if we go back to the project tool, the project folder, your BAS ID folder, we'll see that the submission feature class now has two layers. The whole entity layer, which is the same as the locally sourced layer that you input, and then the changes layer, which is the layer that you will review as part of your boundary submission. So if we look at the attribute table for the changes layer really quick, we'll see that there are currently 238 polygons to review. So many of these are probably just boundary corrections, which require no legal documentation. There's also a great chance that many of the differences identified by this Create Changes tool are too small for the Census Bureau to be able to make the correction. We call these slivers. So we recommend running that third tool in the toolbox called the Sliver Blaster to remove those changes that are too small so that you don't waste your time reviewing these polygons that will be unlikely to update anyway. So to run the Sliver Blaster, you'll need to input your changes shapefile, and you can drag and drop from the catalog tree or use the folder to navigate to where it's saved. You'll also need the census edges, which is in the reference feature class called BAS Edges. There we go. And then the default buffer distance is 15 feet, though feel free to adjust that value up or down to accommodate smaller or larger changes. It's important to note that the Census Bureau's threshold for making proposed changes is 30 feet or smaller if housing is impacted. So you'll then click OK, and the Sliver Blaster will run through. Once the Sliver Blaster has been run, if we look at the attribute table now, we can see that now there are only 176 changes instead of the 230-something that were there before. So that's, 60 less for you to review. So the next step is to run the Format Working in XD tool. This will format the map with symbolization that will assist you in creating a standardized BAS submission and minimize the chance of errors in your submission. So for this tool, all you need to input is your working folder, which is that entity ID folder under the project. And you'll click OK. So this will create the MXD featuring the changes layer and some of the Census Bureau layers. And you can now complete your review of your boundary changes. So I have the MXD that we created open here, and this is what it'll look like when you first open it. Some of the layers from the Census Bureau download will already be included here. So there's Point Landmarks layer, which features cul-de-sacs, parks, airports, cemeteries, and hospitals. An Edges layer, which features lineal hydro features such as rivers and streams, as well as roads, paths, railroads, and non-visible boundaries. An American Indian area layer. An Area Landmarks layer, which includes military installations, parks, golf courses, etc. An Offset layer. The Place layer, which shows the boundary as it currently is in the Census Bureau's data. Your Changes layer, which includes the discrepancies between the locally sourced layer and the Census Bureau's layer, and this is the layer that you will be working in and editing. There are also boundary layers for consolidated cities, census-designated places, counties, and minor civil divisions or census county divisions included, as well as water features such as lakes and ponds. You will also want to add imagery when you review your changes. You can do this by adding a base map or adding your own imagery using the Add Data tool. You can add your own data, a base map, to assist in your review. So as I mentioned, we'll be focusing on your changes layer. So we'll go ahead and open the attribute table. The fields you want to ensure you pay attention to are the change type. This is the field that denotes what type of change the polygon represents. This includes boundary corrections, annexations, de-annexations. When you run the Create Changes tool, the change type will be set to the default value of B for boundary corrections. So if you have any legal changes, you'll want to make sure to update the change type here. And as I mentioned previously, boundary corrections typically follow the same boundary shape. They just adjust the location of the boundary. So if the change is indeed a boundary correction, you don't need to add any further detail in the attribute table regarding the change. If you notice boundary corrections created between where a local boundary is snapped versus where the Census Bureau boundary is snapped, the Census Bureau snaps boundaries to our edges layer. So for example, we can see here that the local representation of the boundary represented by the outer edge of this change polygon has the boundary off of the road, but since the Census Bureau snaps boundaries to the road, we would advise that you delete this change as well as any change polygons for boundary corrections that would move the boundary off of an edge feature. Similarly, if there is a boundary correction where your boundary is currently not snapped to the edge, the Census Bureau advises that you snap the boundary change to the edges layer. So back to our attribute table for a second. If the change is a legal change, such as an annexation or de-annexation, you will also need to fill out the following fields. The auth type or authorization type field, which represents what authorized the change, such as an ordinance, resolution, or state law. The docu field, or the document ID number, you will complete this field with the documentation identification number of the change, such as an ordinance number. The area or acreage of the area. This field is optional except for in certain states. I think it's currently only required in Georgia, but it is helpful to add if you already have that information. And then the effective date, which is the effective date of the change. So you'll populate this field with the effective date of your legal change. Snapping boundaries to the edges layer also applies to annexation. So you can edit these polygons that currently exist by using your editor toolbar. If your editor toolbar isn't currently active, you'll just right-click in this top area and choose Editor. And I apologize, my Arc is being a little slow today with some of the features. There we go. So this editor here, you can turn it on or off. And once you have your editor toolbar active, you can start an editing session and edit vertices. And there's more detail on how to do those things in the digital respondent guides available on our website. So you will also want to pay attention to the relate field. This indicates whether the area is going into or out of the entity in the name field. This name field is located to the right of the relate field. So for this one, it would be being taken out of Zachary. And for these, they would be going into Zachary. So I just have a couple areas that we're going to look at really quick. This is the same boundary correction we looked at in the GUPS file. Like I said, we would consider this a boundary correction because it follows the same basic shape and was probably just incorrectly digitized in the past. So we do not have to add any additional information here. We'll leave the change type as B. You can use your selector tool to select the polygon, and we can see the change type is B, and this is being added in to Zachary. So this next example here, this is something that would more than likely be an annexation. So when you have an annexation, you always want to make sure you update your change type from B. So we'll start an editing session here to edit the attribute table. So we'll make our change type to A, and you can see that when I do that, the color, the symbolization of the polygon is going to be updated in real time. And then I'm going to choose this one more time so that we have to make sure that we add all of the legal documentation information. So the authorization type here is O for ordinance. And our document number, I'll enter in the docu field. And then we'll also want to add the effective date. All right, so we've entered all of our required information, and we're good to go on to the next change. So we can see here that this change is also an annexation. So I'll update my change type to A. And for the purposes of our demonstration, we're going to pretend that I got distracted by something else at work, and I forgot to enter the rest of my information. I came back to it later, I forgot about it, and I think I'm done with my submission. So we'll go ahead and close this out. But you will continue going through all of the records and updating the attribute table for all of the changes you see in your attribute table. So always save your edits, always save your map. And the last two things to do are to run our attribute check tool. So tool 5, attribute check. This requires your change file, which again is in your geodatabase under submission. All right, I'll navigate to it here since it doesn't want to drag and drop. And then you'll want to add your geography type, which is in place. If you are an entity in Georgia, you will want to select this includes changes in Georgia checkbox because, again, we require the area, the acreage for Georgia. So it's going to be looking for that additionally, whereas it normally wouldn't. And then you'll run your attribute check tool. So once the attribute check finishes, you can go back into your project folder and you'll see that there's now an attribute check text file. If we open this up, it checks to make sure that all of the required fields are the correct type and length and that they exist. And then underneath here, it'll also look for any problems. So it'll tell you the ID of the problem as well as what the problem is. So here it sees that we entered that one as an annexation, but then we were missing legal documentation information. So if we were doing this as our real submission, you would want to go back in and fix these issues before submitting your submission through SWIM. You can run the attribute check tool as often as you like and at any point in your process. It'll just write over that text file each time with the new output. So once we've checked all our attributes and everything's good, we'll run the export submission files tool. So here you'll need to enter your BAS ID again. And here, just like in GUPS, with the BAS Partnership tool, you can also add legal documentation here using this additional files dialog. We also ask that if you're the person creating the submission and you're not the BAS contact for your entity, that you enter your information or the BAS contact information, just someone that we can get a hold of if we have questions about the submission. And then you'll click OK. And once that's done, if you look in your Windows Explorer, there will be a BAS return zip file here, and this is what will load through SWIM. So I'll go ahead and show you how to submit your changes through SWIM quickly. And just a few notes on SWIM here. Once you have completed your BAS review, like I said, using GUPS or the BAS Partnership Toolbox, you'll visit the SWIM website to submit to the BAS. So SWIM is a one-stop location for submitting geographic program files to the Census Bureau. We require that all BAS participants use the SWIM to submit updated materials. Please do not send submissions as email attachments, as the Census Bureau cannot accept them due to security policy. If you are participating in other Census Bureau partnership programs or have participated in previous BAS years and already have a SWIM account, You will use your current account to submit files for BAS, and you do not need to set up a new account. The Census Bureau will email the BAS contact a SWIM registration token and digital submission instructions 5 days after the BAS contact responds to the BAS annual response form, indicating that they have changes to report. The 5-day waiting period gives the Census Bureau staff time to update BAS contact record if necessary so that the email reaches the right person. This token is good for one personal account within SWIM. Once you've registered for an account in SWIM, you will no longer need the token to log into the system. If you require additional individual SWIM accounts within your organization, please contact the Census Bureau. So when you're ready to use SWIM, you'll navigate to the SWIM webpage, and you can get to this from the BAS website. If you need to register your account, you'll click on the Register Account button here. You'll add your registration token and fill out all of the other information. Please remember that both email addresses and passwords are case sensitive. So if you enter your email address with capital letters, you'll need to log in to SWIM with capital letters in your email address every time. So I already have a SWIM account, so I'll go ahead and log in here. And if you forgot your password, there's a password reset link here below the password box as well. And I'll hit login. If you have previously submitted through SWIM, your previous submissions will be listed here, but we'll go ahead and click Start New Upload. You'll choose Boundary and Annexation Survey as your census program. You'll select which entity type you're reporting for. So we were an incorporated place. Next, you'll select your state. Again, you can scroll or type to find it. And click Next. And then here you'll select your zip file to upload. So we'll go ahead and navigate to our zip file. Well, for the sake of time, I won't navigate to it right now, but you will go select the zip file. You can also type in any additional comments if there's any information that you want us to know in regards to your submission. You can type them in here. And then you'll hit Next, which will submit your submission, and you will get a thank you screen confirming receipt of the file submission. If this screen does not appear or if issues occur during the upload process, please contact Census Bureau. So once you submit your files through SWIM, you've completed the BAS. If we have any questions while reviewing your submission, we will reach out to you with the contact information you provided or that we have on file for you.
So I'll go ahead and conclude the webinar for today. If you guys have any additional questions, please email geo.bas@census.gov. We'd be happy to take your questions. We can direct them to whoever can answer them. You can also feel free to call us toll-free at the 1-800 number. And above all, thank you guys so much for calling in and for participating in our webinar today. There are great questions, and we really appreciate your participation and your interest in our BAS program.
Thank you, everyone, and that does conclude today's conference. Once again, we do appreciate you attending, and you may disconnect at this time.